Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Hey everyone, and welcome. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Today's show here we're looking at, starting with Thor Ragnarok. Just began shooting, and I know what you're thinking. Thor? Really? He gets another movie? After those two? Especially the last one? And I know what you're thinking. You know, it's a property that, while it does have its fan base, seemingly is better suited for the team-up movies, which is probably why they're going with this format for the new one. But the last two, or at least from the first and the second one, not necessarily the most successful by way of box office, but simply because of the nature of the character and its ability to interlink the other goings-on in the Marvel Universe, especially those things that are taking place outside of Earth, it just becomes a character that really helps develop those things. If you recall, it's Thor that actually linked Guardians of the Galaxy in the end when Sif brings the Tesseract to the Collector. It's the first time we see the Collector, played creepily by Benicio del Toro, and then later he gets some more screen time in Guardians of the Galaxy. So it brings that in, and obviously with what they're doing now, building towards the Infinity Gauntlet, which, again, Thor is the one that gets that information. In Avengers Age of Ultron, he's the one that tells Cap and Tony about the Infinity Stones, what they are, and what they come to do. If you recall, the Tesseract being one of those Infinity Stones, where the gem is actually now in the head of Vision. Now, as they build up towards Thanos, who you saw in the mid-credit Easter egg of the first Avengers, he was a more prevalent role in Guardians of the Galaxy, and then we see him in the very again in a mid Easter egg there for Age of Ultron. He finds the gauntlet and he says, I guess I gotta do it myself, or whatever the line was. So now he's going to be on the mission to do the stones, to get the stones. In Guardians of the Galaxy, they have one of the Infinity Stones too. So we've got a couple of those, I think it is the reality in the mind. I think that's what they got right now. So now we're building up to Infinity War, which is going to be a two-film particular event. So Thor and what he does and what Ragnarok really is going to push on to is going to be furthering that along, I believe. And I know you may moan and groan about another Thor movie, but do not worry. Marvel Studios has that in mind, and what you may not know about this next Thor movie is that amidst having, again, a new villain played by Cate Blanchett, she's great, or is she just tall? It looks like it's going to be a buddy flick, so we will be seeing Bruce Banner, a.k.a. the Hulk, also in this film. Looks like he's going to be either in Asgard or Thor's got to go somewhere else, and he finds Banner, whatever the case may be, but it's going to be a Thor-Hulk team-up, so there's going to be a lot of smashing involved, and I think it really works as far as the dynamic of the characters. So Loki will be back being his Lokiest, Thor is going to be there being his Thoriest, and now we're going to see the playoff between a character like Thor and a character like Bruce Banner, who in a sense, may have to be a bit of the audience proxy coming in and wondering what all this stuff is. Is it as a scientist coming into this realm of magic and science, and not to be the possibility to be removed, looking at the possibility of magic at play and maybe turning Thor, or not turning Thor, but turning the Hulk. Maybe Thor. Possibly turning them against each other, and we may actually get to see a longer version of what we were stoked about seeing in the first Avengers film, of a Thor against Hulk battle, which one of the highlights of Age of Ultron was the Hulkbuster Iron Man suit fighting against Hulk. But if we got to see just a little bit, you don't got to make it the whole movie. A good 5 to 8 minute sequence of Thor and the Hulk battling it out. But they're ultimately going to have to find a way to work together and take down whoever. I mean, with Loki, you never know what end he's going to be playing on, whether he's going to be a bit more of the good guy or will he be back to his old tricks again. And it may be Loki working with someone that turns the Hulk against, somewhat that they already did in the Avengers. But we'll see where this goes, and we're going to see where they link it at, because we only got a couple movies left, this being one. I don't think the Black Panther flick is really going to do much as far as the link to Thanos, but with this, Doctor Strange and Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2 coming out, those events have to line up and bring about what is going to lead to the Infinity Wars Part 1 and 2. Now, those are going to be the Avengers films. Joss Whedon will not be returning to do the Infinity Wars. The Russo brothers, who have done the last two Captain America films, which, arguably have been the best in the MCU so far, Winter Soldier and Civil War, they are taking over. They are going to be helming the next Avengers films, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. And we're going to get more into that later on in the show, as I'm going to go back through, really go through the MCU so far. What has been told? What do we know? Who could possibly be in it? And we're talking bleed over. And it's not just coming from the cinematic universe. There's a possibility of the Netflix Marvel characters to be at play here too. So Thor Ragnarok begins principal photography and everything here today. It was either today or yesterday. And it's got a pretty decent cast. Carl Urban's going to be in it. He's probably going to be a bad guy. We're going to see Valkyrie in this flick. Kate Blanchett in it, as previously stated. Natalie Portman not involved. They might just be killing her off or whatever. I don't think they're going to go any further with that, especially with the introduction of these other characters like Valkyrie, possibly new love interest for Chris Hemsworth there. But most importantly, it's going to be Thor and the Hulk. Now, because of this, and if you've seen Civil War, where Thor and Hulk are not in it, at least the Hulk is mentioned, that very possible that this film could be taking place in that time period. We don't know yet. In fact, when I first saw that it was going to be Thor Ragnarok, I was automatically thinking, as in the comics, Ragnarok is a android made by Stark, who is an android form of Thor that gets involved in Civil War. But that wasn't the case here. So I think they're really going towards Ragnarok as far as the mythological, Norse mythology part of it. Other details involving of what's going on, we're not really sure the scope that's going to be involved here. But the prospect and the idea of this Hulk and Thor buddy flick. I was actually making jokes earlier on a group on Facebook that I'm involved in. They should just take the script from Lethal Weapon and make Thor Riggs and Bruce Banner Murtaugh and just do the same movie just with those guys. It'll be really interesting to see their dynamic with each other, because we had not seen those characters interact, and on their own, they sort of had Stark in the middle or Cap in the middle. So there's going to be a lot of these other characters that have been removed from the equation, and more characters like Thor than there are Banner. So he's just really going to be a Hulk out of water that has to navigate through this universe in dealing with these people that are mostly warriors and warlike, and his, pacifist attitude, to what lengths is he going to fit in? How is he going to change? How is he going to change them? This, even though it being the third installment, which in the MCU almost means nothing. I mean, we got to say, like, Civil War is up there as far as being possibly the best Captain America movie, and that was the third one. So we're really looking at the best opportunity for the best Thor movie being this one coming out as we build closer to the Infinity Wars and seeing the Hulk return to the screen. So that'll be worth starting. Again, it just started principal photography, so we won't see it for another year or so. All right. Now, this concludes our first segment. When we come back, I'm going to get everything. We're going to start the process of catching up on the MCU so far and really starting from the beginning and going on from there. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi podcast. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the first thing we talked about Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor flick. I'll say that 10 times fast. Has begun principal photography, and this is just another link in the chain as far as building up towards what is going to be a massive undertaking in the Infinity Wars. So, when we're looking at the history of the MCU, it obviously goes back to Iron Man, the very first one, which began it and is something that we didn't really see how it was going to play out until the post-credit sequence when Sam Jackson as Nick Fury appears and mentions the Avengers Initiative. And that got a lot of fans just drooling and waiting for this opportunity, because we had an indication that there was going to be this larger universe that was going to connect. And it was something that, if you think about it, really had only existed in the realm of horror, where we saw properties that had their own thing coming together, like Freddy versus Jason, something like Alien versus Predator, those types of things. So the idea of there being an Iron Man movie, and then there being a Thor movie and a Captain America movie, and then bringing them together, that was something that we hadn't seen. And I mean, it is still something worth that excitement. Even Batman vs. Superman had an air of excitement because you hadn't seen Batman on film on the big screen with Superman. I mean, you hadn't seen Superman. So there was that idea of this interconnecting universe by way of film. So we started off with Iron Man, the return of Robert Downey Jr. to now being really the biggest star in Hollywood, and he did it off of making comic book flicks, which I think is pretty sweet. And then we move on to Captain America and Thor. And Captain America is the film where we first saw the Tesseract, and that was what Hugo Weaving's Red Skull was going after. So that was the MacGuffin, really, of the film. And we see that in the hands of the bad guy, and then it ends up getting taken. He ends up sealing it away. Cap wakes up. It's the future. And then we see it play out again with Nick Fury returning, him being these through lines. Now, also what happened, not just Captain America and Thor, is there was the Incredible Hulk, which was really the second stepping stone of that. The idea of bringing these universes in together, which didn't maintain continuity as far as casting went. We all know that Ed Norton got replaced due to some clashing of personalities, I guess you could say. Possible scripting issues. Edward Norton's a notoriously difficult actor to work with. But we saw the Hulk come into it, and at the end of that one, we ended up seeing Robert Downey Jr. appear. He approaches the general, who then William Hurt appears again as Ross in Civil War, but now he's a political guy. He's not in the army anymore. And it took quite a while to bridge those two films, to bridge the franchise back together. But we see the building. So we see another aspect of the Avengers being built in the Incredible Hulk. It was then returned to in Captain America. Like I said, Nick Fury appears. And then we see S.H.I.E.L.D.'s involvement in Thor, so that really brought that in. And we see Hawkeye, there for a moment. Then to ultimately culminate after Iron Man 2, which the Iron Man movies, as far as their connection to building up to the Infinity Wars, has almost been non-existent. It has helped in creating what becomes the Avengers films, but the Iron Man story arcs, if you really look at the first, second, and third Iron Man, really have nothing to do with the Infinity Stones and what's ultimately being at play here. I mean, they're great movies, and we see the Iron Man 2 now pushing forward to the Avengers, and then the first Avengers flick comes out, and it was huge. When you're starting off where it's got Loki and he's interacting with S.H.I.E.L.D., and then now we got to bring in Iron Man, and we got to bring in Captain America, we got to bring in the Hulk. They intended on bringing these characters together, and then Thor just shows up. Again, going after the Tesseract and using that. So now that has more link to Thor and Captain America than it ever did something like the Hulk or Iron Man. But they made other links. So it was fairly ingenious how they did that. We can link Iron Man into Captain America, and we can link Captain America into Thor, which, there is no link to Hulk and Iron Man to Thor, unless you go by the way of S.H.I.E.L.D. The cosmic stuff, that's almost on a different plane. So culminates in the first Avengers flick. A huge movie. Super fun to see all these characters on screen together. And the most, you would say, comic book closeness of the Captain America costume that they've then adapted. And if you look back on it with the covering of the ears and just the costume overall into that flick, you could argue that it looks a little ridiculous now in hindsight, but it was super cool to see that costume and at least taking a stab at making it closer to the comic book costume as compared to the bulky one that you had seen in the first Avenger. And that was a fun movie. So we got the Tesseract involved. Then we see Thanos for the first time, and that was really the ending of what was considered to be Phase 1. So the phases are essentially culminating in these Avengers flicks, and we saw the team come together. We saw the recasting of the Hulk. He comes in, Mark Ruffalo, who's doing a bang up job despite being a bit of a weirdo. And we see that there is something cosmic at play, which now the Avengers can see, but they don't know the extent of it. They see this alien presence, and they know that the Tesseract, is a pretty big source of power. But at this point, not even Thor really knows what it is and doesn't know what it all means. So we have in great style, not a lot can be said about most of the villains from the MCU, short of Loki, who's just had the luxury of being in a lot of the movies itself to develop that. But in good cinematic fashion, the bad guys are still more knowledgeable than the good guys, and that's what ultimately creates for good drama and those circumstances that they have to overcome and to become a team. So they wrap it up there with the Avengers, where we see Loki returning to Asgard as a prisoner. The heroes kind of go on their way, and we see this establishment of the Avengers as being this team. Ultimately, not ultimately. Essentially, once they're appearing as a team, that's when the wolves come out, and it's this: are they good? Are they bad? And the first Avengers flick immediately jumps into that. They immediately get on to, really as an afterthought at the end of the movie, of getting the feedback as to what people feel about the Avengers themselves. And that attitude later comes into not only just Avengers Age of Ultron, but ultimately sparking Captain America Civil War. And then we're going to get into Phase 2 and a little bit of Phase 3 here in our next segment. This is the Golden State Media Concept Sci-Fi Podcast. We'll be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we are back on the Golden State Media Concept Sci-Fi Podcast, talking Marvel Cinematic Universe. And almost, the half hour is almost not enough. So we just talked about Phase 1. We talked about the building up to the first Avengers movie, the introduction of what we will come to know as being the Infinity Stones had not yet been revealed at that point. So we're looking at Phase 2. We're looking Iron Man 3, which again, not really related to any of those. Iron Man 3 sort of exists in and of itself. It's something that was brought to show the backlash, the repercussions from the first movie. Although if you look at it, nothing about the world had changed. I don't know if you know, from an Iron Man 3, you did not get the type of payoff from the first Avengers as you would later in Winter Soldier, and how those all work together. Iron Man 3 was really about Tony Stark dealing with what he went through. It was still a fun movie, and they still connected it through with a little Bruce Banner cameo at the end there. But he gets the thing removed from his chest. Now he's free and clear, fun and happy, and he just has the arc reactors powering the suits on its own. But that was that. You could almost throw that one out and still not lose anything as far as the development of the storyline. It was in Thor Dark World that at the end you see the Tesseract and everything being moved to the Collector. And most of that Thor movie was a throwaway too. I mean, because Thor's got to have his own adventure, and then they just kind of, link that, at the end. And it's really in Captain America, Winter Soldier, that had more impact on what we were seeing that was going to become the next Captain America movie as well, almost as Age of Ultron. And sweet flick that was. So Captain America Winter Soldier ends up exposing modern SHIELD for actually being Hydra, that it had been operating as that really ever since the end of the war, planting that seed. And it's in that flick where we get the first mention of Stephen Strange, who is Doctor Strange, which is a phase 3. I think they're calling this the thing. We're now in phase 3 of that flick. The first mention of that, which kind of got, the fanboys, engines revving there. We see Bucky Barnes comes back. We see SHIELD, which is really just Hydra. They are, and it's arguable because there's really, it's almost, Nick Fury thinks that the weapons that they're developing and the technology that they're developing is really for the sake of combating terror or for the sake of battling. Again, there's no direct mention or really adjustment from Earth itself as far as the invasion. We don't see any measures taken. We don't see a change in the environment. Almost like in Independence Day Resurgence, that invasion of the aliens sparked a massive change overall in not just politics, but in behavior. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which ultimately is what you had to do in the comics too, is you can't have such dramatic changes because then you wouldn't recognize the world that they're inhabiting. But we're almost kind of spoiled in our science fiction audiences as to not see a change in the environment. It's like, okay, there's aliens, but we got the Avengers. And so therefore nothing is done. Really, the people seem to care more about what the Avengers are doing and the damage they're causing than the damage that they're preventing. And that can get a little tired, especially when you come into Avengers Age of Ultron and then to Captain America Civil War, where they just want to talk about who's controlling you and blah, blah, blah. And then nobody at any point is like, with the exception of Iron Man, who says like, hey, remember when the time I closed that thing? But the government thinking that they can get all high and mighty about control and having these situations, nobody points out that they sent a nuke to blow up the entirety of New York City. Nobody brings that up. Nobody's like, oh, you think that you know what to do when you and your shadow buddies were sending a nuclear missile to kill 4 million people on this thing. Oh, and who took care of that? Who made sure that didn't have to happen? Oh, that's right, we did. Why don't you back the hell up? So there was a lot of points that could have been made that ultimately weren't. But we see the Avengers form. Age of Ultron brings back that it gets closer to developing into the Infinity Wars, because now the Tesseract's been cracked open. We actually see the Infinity Stone, but it was our second Infinity Stone. Guardians of the Galaxy came out as something new, something fresh, but ultimately a bridger as well. With the characters there, seeing people who know who Thanos is, what he's all about, and trying to find out what he's going to do. Those guys are going to come up here probably, I'm guessing, in the second Infinity Wars flick. And that brought back the Collector, and we get an idea of what they are. They don't really have a name yet. And we know that there's more than one. So the end of that one, now we know they're with the Nova Corps. That Infinity Stone is with the Nova Corps, so they're going to have to get raided by Thanos. He's going to have to go on a tear, and then he's going to have to come down to Earth and pry it out of Vision's head, because that's where the Tesseract's Infinity Stone is. So we saw that in Age of Ultron. That concluded the Series 2, and then we kick off Series 3 with Ant-Man, which is a really fun movie that it doesn't have relevance towards the Infinity Wars, but it introduces him as a new character in that universe that is going to be a part of the Avengers world, and he comes back for Civil War. And Civil War was just a fun, just a bonanza of good times and good characters. Spider-Man's in the mix. We see Giant Man and Black Panther, and War Machine comes back, and it was so much fun seeing all of those characters on screen, and really to get the tension that's between them, which I had my things about Civil War, mostly being that the Sokovia Accords was essentially, as far as the plot goes, unnecessary. The movie was really just about Captain America's friend is accused of something he didn't do, which, I mean, objectively is the truth, and some people want to bring him in or kill him, and Captain America says no, because he's my buddy. And that was really the point of tension. It really wasn't whether he signed a piece of paper or not. But he kind of needed that to exist for the device for the Black Panther to emerge. So Civil War, really fun. Now we're going to see Doctor Strange come out, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. He's playing Doctor Strange. It looks like a pretty trippy flick. I don't know if you've seen. You can probably catch the trailer online. See where that's going to play out. But then we see that the team is now divided. So by the time that Avengers Infinity War Part 1 comes out, it's essentially going to be an Earth in shambles, because we clearly don't have the defense measures, and now we don't even have the Avengers protecting us, or at least the team that would be the Avengers. Like, they're in prison, Cap's breaking them out, so we'll see what's left of it, but they're going to have to come back together. Tony and Cap are going to have to make nice, and then Hulk and Thor will have to return from their adventures out in space. So that's basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe caught up so far, and look for the Infinity Wars are going to be so big. Possibility of seeing Daredevil from the Netflix show, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Punisher, those folks to be coming into. So it's going to be really fun. All right, everybody, I want to thank you for listening. This has been the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Check us out on GSMCpodcast.com. Also on iTunes as well, where you can not only get this show, but our other fine programming as well. You can follow us on Facebook and or Twitter, whatever your heart desires. And tune into our next show. I'm going to be talking about characters that are more popular than the hero of the story. It should be a fun show to talk about. But the only catch is no main villains. All right, I'll catch you next time. I'm Drew. You're wonderful. Peace.